I love crossovers. You know, when two distinct separate worlds are combined together and the characters interact with one another, or they help each other out to finish their stories, you know, those kind of things. You know, games like Kingdom Hearts or Marvel vs. Capcom, or my all-time favorite, Super Smash Brothers. I also like watching movies. I don't know if anybody else does this, but when I see movies featuring the same actor, I tend to make up stories of my own. The example I'm going to use is Patrick Dempsey. I mean, kudos to him. He is one of my favorite actors. I mean, he was diagnosed with dyslexia at age 12, and he still manages to remember his roles pretty well. You know, that guy from Maid of Honor, Freedom Riders, Grey's Anatomy, Transformers. When I watched him act in those, the characters he portrayed each had their own distinct story that were separate from one another, and yet they still were able to make a story that seemed to connect together, you know? Alright, so his story starts off in Freedom Riders. He just got married, he's planning to go back to school, he just moved into a new house with his wife, who just got a job as a school teacher. Things are pretty good. But then, she starts spending more time with her students, and she gets 2 more jobs to support her students. And he gets kind of angry at that because she's spending less time with him, and he's just not satisfied with that anymore. So he leaves, and that's the last we see of him. But then we find out that he moved to New York in Maid of Honor, and he's sleeping around with a ton of girls. So he doesn't know what to do with his life. He's traumatized from his last marriage, and he's just sleeping around. You know, he's trying to find the love that he lost in his marriage. But then he realizes that he loves his best friend, but she's gonna, you know, marry some dude in Scotland. So he's running around the world trying to prove to her that he loves her, and he's working so hard because he finally found someone that he loves, you know, and finally he does get her. But then he cheats on her, as we found out in Grey's Anatomy. He cheats on her with someone else. But then it comes back to bite him in the ass, because in Maid of Honor, you know that Scottish guy that tried to marry his best friend? Well, it turns out that the Scottish guy was actually really traumatized because some dude just stole his fiancée right from under him, you know. So he joins the army. This is his way of coping. He joins the army and he's fighting war because, you know, love makes you do crazy things, right? So it turns out he comes back in Grey's Anatomy as a trauma surgeon, but since he's been working in the US Army, his Scottish accent is gone. So now he speaks with an American accent, you know? And he came back to Grey's Anatomy to get revenge on Derek. But then later on they become best friends because, you know, Scottish guy realized, oh yeah, you know, she was mean anyway. If she really loved me, she would have stayed with me. And Derek's just like, oh yeah, you know, I kind of cheated on her, so I'm not even with her anymore. So now they're best friends. And then later on, you know how like Derek's kind of unsatisfied with his current marriage now because he married the person he cheated with? So you know how he's kind of starting to be unsatisfied because she's just kind of rebelling against him? Well, it turns out later on he's so dissatisfied that he just leaves, and he comes back in Transformers. And in Transformers, he's just working with Megatrons because he's so unhappy. And his father, as it turned out, because you know how like in Grey's Anatomy, his father was abusive, he beat up his kids, yeah? Well, in Transformers, his father left a legacy for him, and he realizes this. You know, he's so traumatized from his previous marriages and his childhood that he joins up with the Megatron and starts wreaking havoc on the world until Shia LaBeouf kicks him in the ass, you know, and tells him, hey, you're done, and kind of sort of kills him. You know what I mean? I mean, what kind of stories do you guys make up? Alright, and just to leave you guys off with a little bit more mind-blowing, you know how in Titanic, Leonardo DiCaprio at the end, he was in the water, he was freezing, and Rose was being an ass and taking the door all for herself? Yeah, I know he said that, you know, he left her on there because he loves her, but really, if you were in the freezing cold water, you would not be saying, I love you. You just stay on the door while I freeze you. You'd be like, bitch, get off the door. I want to live too. You know what I mean? Alright, but anyway, he's in the water, he is freezing, and the last thing you know is, Rose lets go. She said she'll never let go, and she let go. What a bitch, okay? But she let go, and the last thing you see of him is him drifting off into the water underneath. 10 years later, in Inception, Leonardo DiCaprio, he wakes up on the seashore. Think about it.